Twilight's Nightmare, Chapter 19, Part 2. Twilight entered, flicking a wing for Cadence to follow. The room on the other side seemed unexpectedly normal, but looking back at the door, there appeared to be some sort of device attached to it.
"What's that?"
Cadence asked.
"An electric motor, microphone, and simple computer from Sunset's world." "So something no pony would expect or know how to deal with unless they've been through the mirror,"
Cadence said, nodding. Twilight pressed a button and the door slid closed.
"The room is soundproofed and the whole castle is warded against hostile detection magic, so nothing to give this place away." "Twilight, what do you use this room for?"
Cadence asked, her mind thinking of darker reasons some pony might need a room like this.
So far, hiding heartwarming gifts."
Cadence let a small smile show.
"Even with all of this hate in you, you're still the Twilight I have known for years, if not the one that I full set from the beginning."
Twilight took up a firm stance.
"If you would?"
She nodded at herself.
"Oh, the armor, yes. So, how hard do you want me to hit it?"
Cadence asked, a little uncomfortably.
"As hard as you can." "Are you sure?"
Cadence asked, sounding doubtful.
"I tried hitting it with an anvil for half an hour this morning, not even a chip." "Oh. Well, all right then."
Cadence walked over to Twilight, flexing and loosening up.
"Sorry if this hurts."
She span, bunching up, preparing to buck with all of her might. She could feel the Earth Pony magic rushing to her muscles, and it felt exhilarating. Cadence grinned, and she rarely got the chance to test herself like this. The shockwave caused by the Titanic impact burst her eardrums. She looked over her shoulder, and Twilight was sliding down the far wall, a trail of shattered crystals lining the path that she had taken through the air. Her grin faded as she galloped over to her sister.
"Twilight! Twilight, are you alright?"
She knew that she was speaking, even if she couldn't hear it. Twilight's bleary eyes blinked and slowly focused on her. She nodded, slowly getting onto her hooves. Cadence then pulled her into a hug, wrapping her in her wings. Twilight melted into the hug, relaxing. Cadence even heard the contented sigh.
"Good, my hearing's recovering,"
she thought, and then she sniffed.
"Twilight, you really need a bath."
Twilight looked at herself and investigated, her muzzle twisting in disgust. She then pulled away from the hug.
"Do you mind waiting a bit?" "Oh, there's no need,"
Cadence said with a grin.
"I know a spell that Twilight doesn't."
It was a small thought, but it made her feel ridiculously proud to be able to do even a single piece of magic that Twilight couldn't. Cadence's horn flashed twice in quick succession, her personal grooming spell leaving both of them brushed, cleaned, smelling of roses, and looking their royal best. Cadence laughed with glee. The look of amazement on Twilight's face was just priceless.
"So, what you think about my invention?" "You do realize how complicated that spell was, how many things needed to be taken into account to make that work?"
Seemed like Twilight was in a mild bit of shock.
"Oh, and as long as you know how to do each step of the task with your own hooves, getting magic to do it is a snap."
Cadence then smiled.
"Well, an ascended Earth Pony would be terrifying. Or a Pegasus raised in an Earth Pony village,"
Cadence said with a knowing look. Twilight smiled, a tilt of her head conceding the point.
"Or that, yes. So, shall we begin with your lesson?" "Well, I'm a little more than curious about what we will be learning. The first thing is how to defend your mind. Right now, I could take control of your body, and there's nothing you could do about it,"
Twilight declared, as she started to pace the room. Cadence's eyes widened in horror, memories of shining armor being controlled by the changelings coming to her. She pushed her past the side and carefully studied Twilight's connection to her, deliberately paying no attention to any other. If she saw Celestia's again, she would probably break down right in front of Twilight. Twilight's connection to her was strong and healthy, her love pure, the lack of trust more than healed. Cadence smiled. Strangely, there was also a second connection, thinner and more recent, that also connected to her. It was a mix of pity, duty, respect, and laced with desire. This new link danced with bursts of protective anger.
"What is this?"
she thought.
"Ponies don't have two connections with one pony, nor do they have connections with themselves."
She pondered, remembering what she had seen last time. The only thing that she could be sure of is that Twilight had no intention to hurt her. She loved her and wanted to protect her. For Cadence, that was more than enough to trust her. Twilight stopped to turn her face her and nodded grimly.
I have no idea why Celestia left you defenseless like this, but I will fix that.
Something in Twilight's gaze seemed older, the look of centuries adding weight to her words.
Okay, so what do we do?
Cadence didn't like how small her voice sounded. There was something about that gaze that just made her feel like a fool. Twilight spoke a few words in a strange language. Each word seemed to resonate with her. Something about the way they sounded. That was the language Twilight's song was meant to be sung in. She just knew it.
Learn those words, and learn them well.
Cadence nodded, rolling the words in her mouth. Despite never hearing them before, they felt familiar. The language was just comfortable, and it was easy to speak, like she had spoken it all of her life, even if she only knew these few words.
If some pony gets you to enter a magical contract or other mystically enforced agreement, this will hold both parties to the spirit of the agreement. It is called the Incantation of Good Faith. Adding it before you agree modifies the agreement. If the other party is trying to trick or deceive you, the incantation strikes at them.
Twilight laughed.
With how much of a sense of humor the reprisal can show, I would almost credit Discord with creating the incantation. It only works on magical contracts? I can't use it on mundane ones?
Cadence asked, hopefully. Twilight smiled.
No, but I imagine it would not be hard for you to start replacing mundane ones with magical ones for the more important agreements. I don't know how to forge pacts. I think that's what it's called. How many gaps? No, not important.
Twilight stepped close to her and lit her horn.
I am going to state my intent to train you, to take you as my apprentice. That I will never lie to you during a lesson, and that everything that I cause to happen to you during your lessons, I do for your benefit. Also, there's a small note that neither of us will go to war with each other without formally ending this arrangement. This will allow me to show you how to protect your minds, but for as long as you are my apprentice, it will allow me past said defenses. I will not use this to harm you, other than as needed for your training.
Cadence paled. This was all sounding very serious. The second connection was burning with intensity, but not a single hit of dishonesty. She nodded.
What do I need to do? Once I finish speaking, invoke the incantation and touch your horn to mine. That's all?
Twilight nodded.
That's all.
She flared her wings and took a regal pose. She began speaking in the enchanting language, every word sounding unique. Just imagining that song was nearly bringing a tear to Cadence's eye. She could almost hear the song. The words paused. Twilight presented her horn.
I trust you, Twilight.
Cadence thought as she spoke the incantation, then lowered her horn, crossing it with Twilight's. All of a sudden, the world went white. Cadence awoke. She was warm and comfortable. The familiar softness of her bed beneath her, the sensations of her sheets surrounding her.
Shiny, how do we get back?
She asked, reaching out to where he would typically be. But he wasn't there. His side of the bed was cold. She snapped to alertness, looking around.
Wait, I was supposed to learn something from Twilight. How did I get here?
She worried as she looked around her room. Everything was where it should have been. Motion and a reflection caught her attention, though. In the reflection, she could see servants tending to her room, one even freshening the sheets. Glancing around the room, she was alone. And yet in the reflection, two servants were still working.
What's going on here?
Then there was a knocking at her door.
Come in,
she said. The door lit with a pleasantly familiar magenta aura as it swung open. Twilight stepped in, smiling happily.
What happened, and why are we in the Empire?
Cadence asked. Twilight advanced into the room, taking a seat.
Cadence, in a very real way, you are the Empire. What?
She thought before responding.
You don't mean that in the same way ponies say Celestia is Equestria, do you? No, I do not.
Twilight answered, with a slight shake of her head.
Us Alicorns are as much above other ponies mentally as we are physically and magically.
She gestured around the room.
This is your mental bastion. In your case, it just happens to be linked to the physical world. So, we are in my mind. And somehow the Empire is one of my mind's defenses? Is that what you're saying, right? Yes. And now that you have been here, your mind is fortified by it. Even Luna will not be able to visit your dreams unless you allow it.
Cadence pointed at the servants in the reflection.
And is that really happening right now?
Twilight nodded.
Yes. Do you want to go and talk with them? No. Not yet, at least. So, what is your mental bastion?
Twilight smirked.
Would you be surprised if I told you that it was a library in a tree?
Cadence laughed.
You've always preferred the Golden Oaks over your castle. In another lesson, I will see about showing you around, but not today. Okay, so if we are meant to be so much smarter than other ponies, why can't I wrap my head around the advanced mathematics that you like so much?
Cadence asked in confusion. Twilight shook her head with a chuckle.
Being an Alicorn does not make us more intelligent. We merely have more space in our minds. Our minds and wellsprings are their own plane of reality. So, like the pockets you and Star are so fond of? Yes, exactly. So, what are we exactly meant to do with all this space? Whatever you want. But with this being tied to the physical empire, you have some unique opportunities.
Twilight looked around the room.
I would imagine any changes that you make to the crystal walls here will be mirrored.
Cadence looked at the wall.
And how would I go about changing it? To begin, simply place your hoof against it, let your senses extend into it, and will it to change.
Cadence gracefully extracted herself from the bed and walked over to the wall beside Twilight.
So, physically, I'm still in Ponyville, right?
She asked.
Our bodies are safe, and yes, they are still in Ponyville.
Turning her attention back to the wall, Cadence located the part that she was seeking.
Well, I always wanted some artwork here,
she thought, placing her hoof over the section. A thrum of power danced under her hoof.
Just like magical lessons, know your intent, visualize your intent, and manifest your intent.
She mentally recited as she closed her eyes. Taking a calm breath, she cleared her mind of everything. The troubles of last week fading into unimportance. Another breath, and she formed a single image in her mind's eye. The image of Shining and her marks, held together by beautiful roses clarified in her mind. She pushed the image into the wall, just as if it were a spell. The power in the wall rippled. A moment later, so did its surface. Keeping her eyes closed, Cadence held the image steady. She had long ago learned that you never interrupt a spell midway through unless you knew how to do so safely. She could feel the texture change and parts moving under her hoof. Slowly the power faded, the motion stopping. The wall felt solid under her hoof again. 10 slow breaths later, she opened her eyes. Before her was the image, perfectly shaped in the crystal. Even the colors were right.
Now that is a quite splendid showing,
Twilight said from beside her, pulling her into a hug. Cadence returned the hug, looking between the new work of art and Twilight. Even though she was no longer touching it, the power in the wall, its heartbeat-like thrum, still brushed against her senses. Expanding her senses slowly, every part of the building reported back.
I can still feel it,
Cadence said, marveling at the sensation.
We stand ready, Your Majesty,
A chorus of voices stated in her mind, her mystical sense identifying the sources. All around the building, where guards were usually stationed, parts of her crystal had intent. They had voices. Calling on her recent practice at mental communication with Luna, she reached out to the two outside her room.
Please come in,
She sent. The door was pushed open. Twilight turned, assuming a battle stance, shielding her with a wing. 2 of her crystal guards in ancient armor, even for the Empire, stepped into the room, coming to attention. That is a lot of information to take in, but I can only imagine how Cadence feels because she's the one that's experiencing all of that. Well, here's hoping that Cadence is able to survive all that, though I'm pretty sure that she can anyway. Now let's get on to our golden donators. Top donators, Dash of Evergreen, Peter Coldhard, J Tinman, and Darkside. Dospo, Runescythe 9852, Courier Cruci, Delta Omega, Ryan Dragonwolf, Secret Moon, Tal Raja, The Toilet Snake, Soul Dragon, Cerberus, Starlight Glimmer, Squiddy Boy, David D. Sanchez, Gaggy, Trey, Shadow Drake, Joe Piercy, Alex F., Rainbow Dash, Teal K. Anderson, TV Killer, and John Becker. Thank you all very much for watching this video, and live life to the fullest.